Welcome to the FilmGamer Podcast, Season 3, Episode 26, Number 33. It is astonishing to me that you can have a pattern of doing something, and even if you might do it for quite a while, a month or so, it can be broken, and quite easily. I was watching a Mr. Beast video today. This one actually came out in December, but it came across my timeline now on Twitter, and it is the same premise of my film. And it hits on a lot of ideas that my film does. It takes two strangers, a guy and a girl, both heterosexual, and puts them in a room together for 100 days. Who did this? Why, the most popular YouTuber of all time, Mr. Beast. And he did it in a lot of the same parameters that I imagined. But there was one thing going against it. Authenticity. You see, the main question driving my screenplay is, if two people are together for 30 days, and they're complementary to one another, that is just simply their orientations line up, how might they get to know each other? Would they fall in love? Would they fall in hate? And the fascinating result about this was how unfascinating it is. You know, a couple years ago, this was a popular news story that happened that was maybe local news for months, national news for weeks, and world news for maybe about a day. It was a real-life Lord of the Flies story. A group of boys were marooned on an island for a year, and unlike in Lord of the Flies, it didn't descend into chaos. They worked together, all of them survived, and I wouldn't say thrived because, they're not living like kings there. But they all survived in good health and lived to tell the tale. But you know what we remember more? The chaos of Lord of the Flies. Because it's more interesting, I suppose. Or maybe is it in the telling of the story? I never really liked William Goldman's Lord of the Flies. Number one, it's very British, so you have to listen to a whole bunch of British tough guys, which is one of my least favorite things, coupled with my other least favorite thing, where it's young kids acting tough, and that's Lord of the Flies. It's just a bunch of, I think, Catholic schoolboys. I'm not even going to look it up too much, because I don't want to drag this on, but The Simpsons did it, and arguably did the better version, as is often the case. Animation is a superior format, folks. They crash. School bus crashes off a bridge into a lake, wash up on shore, and they have to make a society out of just a group of boys. And the moral of it, which probably has some political undertones for the time, you can look it up, is mostly about how we descend into chaos. We revert to very simple things. These boys try and set up a system of government, and then they end up having chiefs, and then they all turn into savages, and then once they return, they all revert to what they were, which is boys. Another version of this story, Swept Away, is an Italian movie, or I'll just say a European movie. I learned about it in Italian cinema studies. It is called Swept Away in the Glorious blah, 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 blah. It has a long subtitle, which nobody says. They just say Swept Away, because Madonna remade it, and Guy Ritchie, her husband at the time, directed it. And apparently it was horrible. My Italian cinema studies professor disagreed, but then again, he disagreed. A lot of people, Quentin Tarantino is a good one, where Roger Ebert is another. There are people, they know movies, they have a point of view, and it is so fascinating to hear them go on about a bad movie that they think is really good because their logic is sound. They're like, oh, I liked it because the characters went this way, or I liked it because it evoked this. And meanwhile, I'm like, well, the dialogue sucks and the story sucks, but that doesn't matter to these people. So, yeah, Swept Away is a film by Lena Wertmuller about a peasant and a rich aristocratic woman who wash up on a shore, and their positions are reversed. This is actually done in the Rumen Östlund movie Triangle of Sadness to a larger group, and it's mostly the third act of it, where the poor people, the working class, have value in a simplified society, and that the way the world works now is very advanced, very complicated. And I want to apologize for my throat. My throat is a bit dry. I might have a bit of a cold, a bit of a sore throat. I took one of those, not Altoids, but cough drops. Didn't work too much. Maybe I should have taken a second. I don't know. They're for children. But it said adults take one every 6 hours. I do not exceed the recommended instruction. So, Swept Away underpins that the more advanced and complicated that things get, the more, in a way, we spin out of control, that we get away from who we are. I, at home, had, a laptop, another laptop, a desktop, and 3 phones. Now, I took 3 phones with me to Ottawa, where I have been the last week. And the interesting thing is that all but essential things remained in my routine. I record this podcast. I check Twitter every so often, but I don't check TikTok. I check YouTube, looking for trailers. I get my morning briefing. I don't watch as many movies. I rewatch more movies because I'm introducing them to my sister, and I'll get to one of the new movies. But you'll notice in my Letterboxd report card this week that a couple of movies are being rewatched for reasons that I'll get to. But first, let's break down the box office. This was such a bad weekend at the box office that somebody on Twitter said that most box office analysts should take the week off. And I said, I'm uploading something tonight. Yes, the number 1 through number 6 movies are all holdovers. This is what's supposed to be the middle of the summer, and there's nothing new out. No new wide releases. A year ago, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse opened to $120 million. The Little Mermaid was number 2, opened to $40 million. The year before that, Top Gun Maverick, $90 million. Holdover weekend, but still quite good. The year before that, this is 2021. So, barely a year after the pandemic started, this was when movies really kicked into high gear, and it was A Quiet Place Part 2, $47 million. Cruella, number 2, $21 million. This is in the thick of the pandemic. In the pandemic, you had nothing. You had something called The Wretched, and it's so fascinating to go back through 2020's box office, which has all movies you've basically never heard of. Let me go through, rattle off a list of movies from 2020 of this year. The Wretched, We Summon the Darkness, Strike Circles, Max Winslow, and The House of Secrets, The Trip to Greece, which I've heard of because of the Trip movies, How to Build a Girl, and True History of the Kelly Gang, which I saw and watched 20 minutes of and stopped because it was boring. I believe that one was Jed Kurtzel who directed that. Is box office gonna actually tell me if he was the one who directed it? No, because they suck now. Let me just click the link Crew information, Justin Kurtzel. Okay, they at least gave me that. Good cinematography by Ari Wegner. Jed Kurtzel was the composer. Anyways, that movie stars Russell Crowe. It's like an Australian movie, and it's one of those hard westerns, that's gritty, but also boring. So, yeah, I got 20 minutes into it and was like, don't really care for it. Don't really care for the lead. He's one of those people who is just kind of a bland white guy. I'd rather have a bland black guy just because it's fascinating in Hollywood, the merit system. You have to really be good as a minority to succeed. And the reason for that is you're competing with people who are identified by the majority of moviegoers on screen. So if the majority of moviegoers are 18 to 25-year-old white single males, most of the heroes you see on screen will be 18 to 25-year-old white single males. Now, most of the group of people who go to the movies now en masse are older than that because the creators of those movies and TV shows are older and they want to appeal to a wider audience. And many of the movie stars haven't moved on, and we haven't gotten new ones. But for the most part, young white men are well represented. And as a result, we have a lot of boring actors who just kind of hang around, George McKay being one of them. That is the lead of this movie, which you will likely never see in your life. Famous philosopher Jerry Seinfeld once said that the human brain is divided into two people, night guy and day guy. The night guy stays up late, as I am doing now. He watches TV, he does what he wants, he's having a good time. Yeah, should I go to bed? Because I need to wake up early and go with the kids to school, drive with them, maybe at 10. Yeah, I don't know. That's morning guy's problem. We constantly do these things where we make long-term bad decisions that in the short term feel good. Every time. The human brain is a funny thing, and we almost never learn, and we constantly do it. I mean, on a larger scale, and forgive me if I sound crude here, but good example is going without protection during sexual activity. Feels good in the moment, feels really great for 2 seconds, and then slowly it dawns on you what a bad decision you might have made just for those few moments of greatness. We wreck ourselves. Do I need to study for this test? No, I'll play video games. I'm having fun in the moment. And then the day of the test comes. Oh, why didn't I study more? Oh, gosh. Oh, this is terrible. And then, sometimes you're given a project and you cram. You cram and cram and cram, and you think, oh, I understand now. Why didn't I give myself more time? If only I had more time, I would have done. When in reality, no. You were always going to leave it until the last minute. So why is it that when it comes to us, we force ourselves to make dramatic examples on the precipice of change? And it's because on the precipice of change, you're most willing to accept it. You're most willing to believe in miracles, move mountains, change things, do things, because you're desperate. You move, you shift things around. Your regular routine disrupts. Things become more important. Other things become less important. And in those changes, you realize who you are. Last summer, the industry went to a standstill where, because the advancements of things like artificial intelligence made it so that People could replicate artists' work. You can see with Scarlett Johansson, it happened a few weeks ago in Settled, where the CEO of OpenAI, who has been creating all this, AI programs that the internet has been going ham with, reached out to Scarlett Johansson, who was in the movie Her, and said, "Hey, you're an artist. Hollywood is worried about this kind of stuff. How about you be our voice, so like essentially Siri, and you can bridge the gap between creators and engineers, between Hollywood and tech, and smooth things over." And she said, "No, thank you." Then a couple months went by. They asked her again. She said no. And then they got a sound-alike. And then after getting that sound-alike, they released the sound, and it sounded like Scarlett Johansson. And people started telling Scarlett Johansson, a lot of times it's the communication of the problem that's the problem, not the problem itself. There's a good line in one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies where Jack Sparrow goes, "The problem is not the problem. The problem is your attitude about the problem." There are times when you might have beef with somebody. I never understood watching this in movies, where two characters would have a problem. Let's say on the basketball court or in a prison movie, one would knock the other out. Then the guards would get involved. And the good guy would always cover for the bad guy. And I wondered why, like prison rules or loyalty and stuff. I never really understood that. But no, it's the principle of it. It's the principle of we can solve problems on our own. And when we introduce third parties and bigger people who may not understand or grasp the problem, we introduce more problems. So if you keep the problem intimate, it is much easier to manage. Well, Hollywood had to manage this problem itself with AI. Scarlett Johansson didn't record any lines. Sam Altman, who is the creator of OpenAI, hired a sound-alike. And then, this is the kicker, they released it. All of Scarlett Johansson's friends and colleagues told her about it. She didn't previously know. They said, "Is this you? Did you record for this?" And she said, "Why, no. But now that you say it, it does sound like me, gee." And it is illegal to impersonate somebody with the intention of, impersonating a known person. Had they simply gone to a sound-alike, not asked Scarlett, and recorded the lines, things would have been fine. But he had to ask and then get denied, and then ask again and get denied. And so then he did the next best thing. And then the sound came out, and somebody on Twitter said, this sounds like Scarlett Johansson and Her. Another guy on TikTok said, "Are you Scarlett Johansson?" Which is, by the way, a whole dumb thing. Which raises some existential questions that really should have been asked in the Scarlett Johansson movie Ghost in the Shell, of like, who am I? My understanding of the TikTok was that he didn't actually believe, and I hope this, that it was Scarlett Johansson in secret, because why would it be? She's an actor. She doesn't have a daily personality for us all, so she has no reason to, be secretive unless she's doing some Oscar-worthy uncredited work or a favor for somebody. But my getting was that this guy was trying to find out if the robot that he was talking to through OpenAI had the essence of Scarlett Johansson within it, so that it was somehow had the approximation of a brain of self-consciousness of Scarlett Johansson. He was testing it in that way, that maybe this large language model, which all these robots learn on, to communicate with voice typing and voice search and voice augmentation, if it somehow had built up the essence of Scarlett Johansson, as an example. And the answer was no. So the problem was that people got confused, and Scarlett Johansson found out about it. And Scarlett Johansson is very protective of her image. and she's very protective of her rights. She was screwed over in the early year of the pandemic, about 2021. She was supposed to be paid $20 million upfront plus a gross bonus of, if her movie Black Widow, the Marvel movie, hit certain targets. I've talked about this before, but basically if it hit a certain threshold of movie theater tickets, would she then get a bonus? And there was a goal set, but what Disney did under a temporarily new CEO who has since been fired was they released it simultaneously on streaming. So people could pay $20, stay home, or maybe it was $30, and watch it. And about half the people did. And in response, they asked the CEO, hey, doesn't this screw over Scarlett Johansson? And this dumb guy's response was, she's been paid enough. And that came across, certainly to me, as just like a flex. That wasn't really a flex because she ended up suing, and they settled, and it was very public and very ugly after she had been in so many Avengers movies that she basically ended their relationship temporarily until the successor, who's also the CEO's predecessor, smoothed things over and said, oh, she's going to be in a Tower of Terror movie. We look forward to working with Scarlett Johansson. But yeah, for Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO, to think, oh, yeah, this person isn't litigious. And then somebody tweets, this sounds like her, as in Scarlett Johansson from the movie Her. And he retweets that as an endorsement, saying, basically, yep. Why would he then think, oh, she won't sue, even though she's done that before? Scarlett Johansson was one of the first victims that I know about of the quote-unquote revenge porn. Not, now, traditionally it's supposed to mean of, like, exes get mad, they post either sexy videos they recorded together to embarrass the woman, or now we have these deep fakes, or you Photoshop Scarlett Johansson's head onto some other woman's body and make it look fake and simulate porn. That's what Scarlett Johansson was a victim of, and that's where she got into the legal arena, because she's like a woman in her 30s, so she makes a lot of money in Hollywood, but doesn't have the years of experience that like an executive suit would have, or the power that an executive suit would have. She's been acting since she was 8, and she's 38 now, so she has 30 years of experience. But in terms of executive and stuff, she is still mostly an actor who now does products in her side hustle and stuff outside of Hollywood. So that's the fascinating thing, is that you're dealing with somebody who's very protective of their image. So you'd be stupid to think that they wouldn't, sue. So, yeah. Early days of the pandemic, that movie came out, made a lot of money. The movie that was number one this weekend is Garfield. And the reason that is because last summer, when there was a strike, the actors were worried about AI, as I just mentioned, and the writers were also worried about AI. So they took a long time to decide on what they wanted their deal to be going forward. It was the biggest renegotiation of rights for a writer and an actor who decided to strike at the same time. Both guilds struck at the same time. The directors took an early deal, and they try and act like they were cool and it was a historic deal, and they actually lost a lot of ground because both the actors and the writers struck and got AI protections built into their jobs now. I hear the directors already had a good deal, so it's not a terrible loss, but basically what happened was, the short term, they realized this is going to be bad, might as well buckle up. And the executives thought, well, if we're not spending money on talent during these short few months, we'll make a lot of money because we'll cut overhead. And people were slightly nervous, but nobody was really thinking about the now, the year later, when there are no movies coming out. You know what movie opened this weekend? The biggest movie that opened this weekend is yet another IFC, Independent Film Channel movie. As I mentioned, Godzilla King of the Monsters, huge, expensive movie. Didn't do as well, was a bit of a disappointment, but it cost $170 million. And is, a fan favorite of mine. Characters aren't really worth a damn, but the monsters do fight good. That came out in 2019 on this weekend. But now we have, after all these hits, year after year, we have the Garfield movie in its second weekend being number one. And that's a problem because not many people are going to the theater. And if less people go to the theater, then the theater will close. And if the theaters close, then more stuff goes to streaming. And if more stuff goes to streaming, then we are given a less individual choice over the movies we see. And if we are given a less individual choice over the movies that we see, then the movies will cease to matter as much to the people making them. And if that's the case, then the movies get shittier. And that's why streaming movies are the way they are. The reason movies that are in theaters are better is because they have to go through a whole lot of checks and balances, and people have to put up money on the movie individually. Whereas to a tech company like Netflix, it's just an end game, a bottom line. Now, that's true for a company like Warner Brothers or Sony, but they still have to factor in individual pricing. A movie does well, they make more of it. A movie does less well, they make less of it. For a subscription movie, it doesn't really matter how good it is. Jennifer Lopez was in a movie on Netflix called Atlas. It was directed by Brad Payton, who has never directed a good movie in his life. He did the movie that I regard as the beginning of the end of current Hollywood where movies started to suck. San Andreas, earthquake movie with The Rock. Still haven't seen it, but it's the first one where I saw it. I'm like, the CGI on this isn't very good, but it's making a lot of money. But the story isn't very good, but it stars The Rock. And then from then on, especially as The Rock went on, we started to get more movies with worse CGI, where bad CGI was acceptable, and it was more about branding than it was about acting or making an individual movie. It was like movie by committee, which these movie studios have always done, but with less craft and more cold calculation of just like, if I get paid up front and I promote this as a part of me, then that will matter more than if the movie is good or not. And that's kind of where we're at. There's 1 or 2 or 3 good streaming movies a year. They're made, and then Netflix buys them. But movies like Atlas, which stars Jennifer Lopez, number 1, by the way, I'll watch it because it's free for me. Like, I'm already paying the subscription. I'll watch whatever I want. It doesn't cost me any extra. And that's where the individuality goes out the window and movies start to suck. So, what's number 2? Furiosa, Mad Max Saga. People wonder, why did this make less money? Well, for starters, it doesn't look as good. Bad CGI, as I mentioned. And it is a prequel, again, makes less money. And it doesn't star Mad Max. And it's about a female character who was perfect as they were and didn't really need a further explanation, but they decided to go through with it anyways. And so this movie has made $49 million domestic, 114 worldwide, cost 168. Needs about, $340 million to make money. Is it going to get that? No. But they should have paid attention to the genre. I mentioned last week how Tomb Raider, the female-led reboot of the Lara Croft series, previously starred Angelina Jolie, made the same amount of money that this one is making. But Warner Brothers wanted the Oscars that they got with Mad Max, where it won 6 Oscars, as I mentioned last week. So they self-funded this. Number 3 is If. This movie cost $110 million, has made 137 million worldwide. It's performing well. Stars Ryan Reynolds. John Krasinski directs. It's holding fine. Performing well with kids, but didn't open as high, but it's staying put. So, that's a good thing. Okay, so, number 4 is Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, a movie I previously said was sort of flopping, underperforming, and the fact is this. It is only a few million away, about 6 million from beating War for the Planet of the Apes domestically in the US and in Canada. Worldwide, it's about 150 million short. However, it cost 160 million, so it, by rule of thumb, only has to make 320 million to profit. It has made 338, so it's profitable. And being part of a franchise, when a new movie comes out, people watch the old ones. The whole franchise as a whole makes money for the same studio, which usually has most of the movies. In this case, 20th Century has all of the movies. So, what annoys me is that I recognize that this is a significant amount less than the last movie, but it's supposed to be a reboot. So, if it's a creative reboot or a soft reboot where it's a sequel but takes place hundreds of years after the last one, but it has a new director, if the hook is that it's not as good as the last one, but is somehow fresh, that's not enough enticing to, continue with the franchise. Like, I'm sure these will be enough dollar signs to any dim-witted executive under Disney, which has the umbrella for 20th Century Studios. But anyone with a brain and some movie finesse can see that this is a problem, because even though you can say, well, it's performed in line with the last one had Russia and China on its back. This one, movies don't do well in Russia or China anymore for obvious reasons, being American movies. And those markets have since developed their own stuff and are a bit more hostile to American movies. You can say it's pretty good, because there is a chilling thing that goes on when it comes to bean counting, where the quality of the movie is sort of besides the point. Paramount did a smart thing with the Terminator franchise. It made Terminator Genesis not a good movie, but it made some money, did really well in Russia. And what they decided to do was take the money and run. They said, okay, we were supposed to make a trilogy of movies, a trilogy of new movies. This is back in 2015. The one with Khaleesi from Game of Thrones being on it. And they said, well, this made less than 100 million domestically, but it made 350 million internationally, 440 million worldwide. It cost 155 million. Let's just take the money and run. It got bad reviews. It wasn't a good movie. People didn't like it, but it made some money. Let's just leave it at that. And dumber executives don't do that. They say, this made money. We need money. We like money. Let's go forward with another one. And what you need to do in order to maintain the health of a franchise is you need to approach every single movie like it's its own project. Anytime a studio or filmmaker says, oh, I'm going to make a trilogy, and they film parts 2 and 3 together, it ends up sucking because they're sandwiching 2 movies together, or getting lazy and combining costs, or not paying attention to the pacing of the story. And so executives get greedy, they get complacent, they're happy with the money, and what happens is a Divergent situation where Divergent is okay, Insurgent, the sequel, sucks, and then Allegiant tanks because the last one wasn't good, but they had already greenlit it. So they killed the franchise because they treated it like a conveyor belt. That's what I'm worried is going to happen with Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes, because going by the trailers, I wasn't interested, and going by the reviews, it sets itself up for a potentially more interesting movie without delivering on the first part of the installment. So it opens higher than the last movie. It makes more domestically than the last movie, but it makes less worldwide than the last movie. To me, that's a warning flag. That is, be careful, 20th century. And I don't think they will be. I think they'll make another. It'll make slightly less. If they're smart, it will cost less, but it will probably cost more. And it will have its fans. And then it'll be a Furiosa Mad Max Saga situation where people go, why aren't people showing up to a lesser movie this time? Foolish, I say. Number 5 is The Fall Guy, which, like, if is performing right in line with expectations, proper expectations, if it's performing in line, and in fact ahead of the movie Free Guy, which Reynolds made last. Okay, that's good. Cost $110 million, and we're out of the pandemic, but that's still good. The Fall Guy is performing similarly to Anyone But You, which is a good comparison. It's just that Anyone But You cost $25 million, and The Fall Guy, for some reason, cost $130 to $150 million. Bad budgeting. Strangers Chapter 1 only drops 33%. By all accounts, this movie is not good, but horror is profitable. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Make a horror movie, folks. It can be terrible, but if you have blood and guts, you don't need anyone famous, but you promise the high stakes of people trying not to get murdered. People will show up because they'll show up for dates. They like to be scared. It's a very exploitative genre in a good way. It gives people the cheap thrills they want, and in movies, cheap thrills are best. What's funny enough is the number 7 film is a Crunchyroll anime film distributed by an underling of Sony's, but animes tend to appeal to their niche and no one else. This made $3 million. It's called Haikyuu, ! The Dumpster Battle. Yeah. Won't be seeing it. Wish it the best. Number 8 is a movie I am interested in seeing. It's called In a Violent Nature. Its big hook is that it's a slasher movie from the point of view entirely of the killer. Now, I don't consider that, honestly, a very novel concept, because I find that Jason movies are like that, and there's a movie series called Maniac that's like that. But by all means, have your gimmick, like pretending people haven't been around for generations and no other movies have been done. But, yeah, it got good reviews. It looks like it's shot in 4:3. But, slasher film, I'll give it a watch. The reviews are good. But JoeBlow.com gave it like a 6 out of 10. They said it wasn't for me. And I think I'll end up on that spectrum. But in the meantime, this is an independent film released in about 1,400 theaters. Made $2 million. I don't know. Is it going to show me how much it cost? Because I know it's probably less than that. This is like an independent film. And by that I mean no major studio. Someone just made it because they had the money, maybe a few government grants, had an idea, convinced maybe one producer or several, funded together a lot of stuff. And, yeah, it doesn't show the budget, but it does show the running time. It's a 94-minute movie. Yeah. It was filmed in Kawartha Lakes of Central Ontario. Yeah. Oh, and then they changed locations to the Algoma district near Sault Ste. Marie. Okay. It's kind of fascinating because it's a small movie. It surprises me when I get tax incentives must have moved mountains, but it's like, yeah, it's a small little independent film. Oh, is it being made locally in Canada? Sometimes yes, other times Bulgaria, stepping in for Detroit. And it's like, okay, so it's cheap enough to fly all the actors out to Bulgaria and then hire a local crew and go to another continent. It's cheaper to create a company there than it is, just getting a person here and an iPhone. That's kind of fascinating how the movie industry works. I never quite understood it, but that's how movies are made. They're made in all different ways and any way you can. Number 9 is another TIFF movie from last year. Ezra. Bobby Cannavale directed it. It's about a guy who has Robert De Niro is in it playing Bobby Cannavale's father. Rose Byrne, who is in real life Bobby Cannavale's wife or girlfriend. It stars Bobby, and he has a child with autism, and it's just a slice of life movie about, what's it like living with autism, and he thinks it's a death sentence, but he realizes, this kid's kind of cool, even though he has it, and he learns that autistic people are people in a weird way. But yeah, it's his, Rose Byrne is his partner, and they've done so many movies together, so, people liked it. The reviews were decent. It's more like feel-good movie type material, but, yeah. He directed it. He got to make the film he made, and, good for him. Oh, sorry, I am wrong. Bobby Cannavale did not make this movie. Tony Goldwyn, who was the president of the United States on Scandal and the bad guy in Ghost, it directed it. And I like that guy, to use his own words, in the Gerard Butler movie Plane, when Gerard Butler beats a guy who's being an asshole on a plane, and he's the pilot, so he gets fired. Tony Goldwyn sees that footage and says, I like this guy, which is funny because he's kind of presented as like the middleman, the guy in the movie who looks at the screen and delivers exposition. So he could be the villain or whatever, but they just bring him in, and it's like, does he have any conflict with Gerard Butler? No. I like this guy. And you guessed it, Tony Goldwyn, a guy who constantly plays villains, but is likable in real life. All actors who play villains are likable in real life. Why? Because they don't take themselves as seriously. They're not as worried about image. They're there to have fun. They're there to have a good time. They're there to be big, be memorable. And that's what I like to see, folks. The number 10th movie is a movie called Summer Camp, which all I know about it, aside from being distributed by Roadside Attractions, another indie label, it stars Diane Keaton, who has done so many crappy, honestly not enjoyable movies that I haven't even touched because they're so not great. And what's funny to me is Diane Keaton won an Academy Award for Best Actress for Annie Hall. And the funny thing is that unlike, Bruce Willis or many actors who do straight-to-video stuff, she doesn't quite do that. She does these movies that do have theatrical runs that appear in theaters, but they are number 10, and they always get dumped in theaters, but they get advertised twice. They appear in theaters, and people are like, oh, I'll go see this. Old people who just do walk-up business. They're not looking at trailers and stuff. They just go to the movies, catch these bad Diane Keaton movies, and, go with their church group or their old girlfriends or something. And Diane Keaton, all of these movies, most of them are theatrical movies. They're not straight to video. They're garbage, but they make it to theaters. And that kind of means something to me. I kind of find it funny because it's like, it's not straight to video Drek. It's theatrical Drek. I'd love to make theatrical Drek because every movie essentially gets released twice. It releases in theaters, makes $1 million, nobody remembers it, and it goes to streaming, and a bunch of people watch 20 minutes of it and turn it off, and somehow that is a viable business model. Oh, capitalism, the economy, it fascinates me. Good for Diane Keaton, she found a way to work. She won an Oscar, and many women who win the Best Actress Oscar actually get their careers hurt because their prices go up and people don't want to pay those prices. But it's funny to me, a young woman who's struggling with that, who may not win an Oscar sometime soon, but the reviews for this movie are good. Young Woman in the Sea. It's produced by Jerry Bruckheimer. It's a Walt Disney Studios motion picture that is a live action and not based on any pre-existing material. It is based on a true story, but it's part of the Walt Disney inspiration, sports gambit, and they call these brand investments. These are movies that Disney makes that are not expected to make money. However, they are message movies that promote the ideals of what the company promotes. That is, imagining that you can do something and doing it and achieving your dreams. And that, people are cynical about corporations. They're all about money and the bottom line. But it matters when it says that a corporation has values or morals or some sort of personality that says, this will not make a lot of money, but it is important to us to tell people who we are. So we're making this movie. And they actually try and do it. And apparently they've done well for this. The main actor is Daisy Ridley, who is and will forever be known as Rey in Star Wars. So it's good to see her in another movie that's not that. It's good to see her in a movie that's not that, for the same company that she works for, getting something else made. It's good to see Jerry Bruckheimer, after Top Gun Maverick, kind of get a resurgence. And it's good to see this movie get a theatrical release rather than being shoved onto Disney+. Now, this is going to be here for 2 weeks in theaters, and Disney isn't even really reporting grosses. We know it made $500,000. We don't know how many theaters. And then it's going to go straight to Disney+ and maybe do well, but there's multiple ways you could release this movie. They should do what Disney did in the 90s, and they used to do this a bit. They would release it limited release, even though it's like a mainstream movie. Release it in one theater, El Capitan Theater, that Disney owns. That will have a big glossy premiere, and then because of that, because it's in one theater only in the country, lots of people will come in. That builds buzz, and then you can go super wide and dump it, into 1,000 theaters, 2,000 theaters, whatever. And then give the theater owners a big bone, because we know that they have to pay for half the movie. Disney keeps some of the money, and it's only weeks after that. So weeks after that, just give the theater owners a big bone and wait for it to make less than $1 million, then put it on Disney+. Because I don't understand why these movie studios decide not to, space out their releases. Like, we're in a bit of a drought. Why are you in such a rush to make less money? It'll do well on Disney Plus anyway. Look at Anyone But You on streaming. #1 film on Netflix in America. That movie was in theaters, waited 4 months to come out to streaming. People still remember it. People remember it. Oh, I want to see that. And then they go see it in bigger numbers, because it's like they know that it's a real movie. It's not something that The Rock made in between tequila commercials. It's a real movie. This week's Letterboxd report only includes one new film, the first Omen. You might know by previous episodes that I have been looking forward to seeing this one for a while, and it was included in my mental list of movies I wanted to see on Disney Plus that would eventually come there and make it worth the $120 I spent for an annual subscription. This is the first movie that Disney has released this year. It came out at the beginning of April, and it is a release under their label 20th Century Studios, the previous Omen movies being a 20th Century Fox release. It is notable for being a theatrical release, being directed by a female under 40. and it is her first major studio film. It is also a horror film, which makes it an interesting fit for the umbrella of Disney, even though it's within its own genre. The movie did not flop. It cost about $35 million, made about 50 worldwide. But the thing is that because of Disney's buyout of 20th Century Fox, they fired the marketing division, and as a result didn't market it very well despite a stellar teaser trailer. I recommend watching the teaser trailer. However, the movie trailer, the more official one that's supposed to tell the story and whatnot, is confusing. It's so confusing that my professor, who admitted to me on Twitter that vaguely remembered the previous movie, but this was confusing to me. I didn't know what it was about, and I thought, wow, that's where we're at with Disney's takeover of Fox's assets, where basically people just don't know what movies are about, like regular people. Like, the studios have gotten so large that unless they really hammer down event filmmaking, they do not know really how to convey a premise of a film to someone. I mean, looking at just the yearly box office for this year, what are our moderate hits, those under $100 million that didn't have blockbuster budgets? You have the Bob Marley movie, which was okay, but everybody knows Bob Marley. That's an easy sell. What else have we got? I have to switch the default here, which is always calendar grosses. Nobody cares what a movie made in its last 4 months versus its 1 month that it opened. It's dumb. Box office mojo, change it. So we also have Mean Girls, which is a remake. Civil War. Has that flipped below 1 million yet, I wonder? Because that made great use of the theater. I enjoyed it. Yes, just last Memorial Day weekend. So when will that come out on streaming is what I want to know. I predicted in July. Let's see if anything comes up. Yahoo 2 days ago. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, streaming on Peacock. Oh, it's something else. Well, that's dumb. I mean, that's the issue with a movie called Civil War. It could really be about anything. I thought that it would be about the movie, and it was about a documentary with the exact same title. Don't care about somebody reviewing it. When will it be streaming? Now, I read these all the time. Let's see how this responds. The central question of the theme of the movie, the second paragraph is the director's resume. The third paragraph is everything you need to know to watch it, which is, by the way, nothing. If it's a good movie, everything you need to know is nothing. It is explained in a movie, and that's it. The next section is about what the movie is about. The next paragraph is it worth watching? Followed by its box office gross. The next paragraph is how to watch it at home, in which case it is rent for $25 or $20. And then the next paragraph that we came to watch it for is it streaming? And the answer is that it hasn't been announced yet. We have no idea. There's no official release date yet, but we'll keep you updated when it's announced. Yeah, that's waste of time, and my speculation is still the best. So that is kind of as it goes for like under the radar movies, but I wonder how much they paid to advertise it, because that had a really good marketing campaign with just a really good premise of what if the U.S. fell into a civil war today. Then you have The Beekeeper. Again, Jason Statham beat him up, easy sell. These are premise movies. They were really popular in the 2000s. Not popular now for some reason. You have the Zendaya tennis movie Challengers that's doing okay. And Argyle, massive belly flop. Madam Web, which is funny just because it's a horrible movie that was distributed well. So It made over $100 million, cost 80, and through its sale to Netflix and stuff, it ended up doing well. And then, Monkey Man did about as well as it could. It made some profit. It cost like 10 to 12 million. Abigail, which cost 30 million, too much for a movie about people in a house. And Imaginary, which is about a killer teddy bear. So we don't really have a lot of breakout movies. In fact, Denis Villeneuve, director of Dune Part 2, said in fact that he is depressed that we are into June and none of the main movies, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes being the biggest one, came even remotely close to topping Dune 2. In fact, Denis said he's depressed that he thought it would have happened by now, that a movie would have topped Dune, which opened March 1st, that a movie would overtake it. But in fact, Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes has made only half of that. So, the first Omen was poorly marketed. The movie itself is great. The one issue with the movie is that it kind of shouldn't be an Omen movie. The last 10 minutes of it go into this race to set the pieces up for the prequel movie. And it's we're putting together a team kind of scene that I've described, where the movie stops in its tracks telling the story it's supposed to tell and moves on to talking about the next movie, which is in another movie that many people may not even see. And it's just to let you know, this lines up. This is legit. And the fact is that audiences don't care. Okay? This is a very well-framed movie, which has good commentary and subtext about... I'm going easy by taking the easy critique and saying, oh, well, it's about the Catholic Church and the patriarchy trying to control women's bodies, but it does this fascinating flip-flop, and I talk about this where it's like, is it man-hating, is it not man-hating? I believed it would be sympathetic. Watch it. The framing, the cinematography in this movie is great. The lead girl, whose name is Nell Tiger Free, is fantastic. It is just a really good, unsettling movie. I wouldn't call it scary, but the framing is excellent. The subtext, how it presents itself, is excellent. It has some dazzling, horrific imagery in it. There's a slow motion shot of a pole landing on somebody's head. Really good horror stuff. And then in the last 10 minutes, it's like, oh, we're in a franchise. We gotta set the pieces up, and maybe if this is a hit, we might, I don't know, get a sequel out of this somehow. It doesn't make much sense. But it should have really been presented as a one and done, but they got a little greedy, and for that, the movie suffers a bit, but it's worth the watch, 3.5 stars. And then I watched Star Wars Episode 1 and 2 with my nephew. I've seen Phantom Menace a number of times, same with Attack of the Clones. I gave Phantom Menace 3 stars. The pod race, the lightsaber fights, the music are all good. The worlds presented in both these movies are excellent. And the action quota in 2 is quite good, even though it has a weaker story. It's just that he got to see it for the first time, and he loved it, as I did when I watched it. Thought it was so cool, like Jar Jar Binks. Wasn't as enamored with Jar Jar as I was, but that's fine. He didn't miss him. Fascinatingly, he doesn't get, and how could he, that Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader are 2 separate people, even though he knows that Luke Skywalker is the son of Darth Vader. He accepts that Padme is the mom of Princess Leia, but knows that Anakin Skywalker is the lead, but he hasn't made the connection. And I wonder, watching it, will he? These are fun movies, perfectly good children's movies to watch. And that's something that most people who are fans of Star Wars forget. These movies were made for kids. And now that I'm older, It seems like the sequels were made for me as well, and not a lot of kids. But I told him that there were other Star Wars. I said to him, Hayden, when my dad was a kid, there were 3 Star Wars movies. And when I was a kid, there were 3 Star Wars movies to watch, making 6 total. And now that you're a kid, there's another 3 Star Wars movies. There's actually 2 more, but we don't talk about those. So, the one thing was, I liked seeing his excitement, and the one thing I wanted to see was his excitement when Yoda fought in episode 2, but I had to change the baby at that time, so I just had to settle for hearing, whoa, cool, Yoda's fighting, and I was disappointed to miss that, but what are you gonna do? That's being an uncle. Another movie I added, because I've been rewatching a lot of movies, was Oblivion. It's a Tom Cruise movie from about 2013, about 10 years ago. And it's good, but the story is a little light, and it looks absolutely beautiful, stunning. It has a great Hans Zimmer rip-off score, which I wrote about on FilmGamer.com. And it has an interesting, provoking central mystery to it. It's just the movie is boring and long and ponderous, and that's good for a vibe, but it isn't enough to satisfy. My sister, in fact, when watching it, asked to skip through 2 chapters, and so we did, because I've seen it twice, and it was really dragging and getting late in the night, and I skipped 2 chapters. You know what story I missed? Nothing. This was a movie, as many movies are, where you can essentially take out entire scenes that accomplish nothing. They add some atmosphere. Maybe something interesting happens, but it's the darlings that aren't killed that a more judicious editor could have taken out. So I just wanted to note that I saw Oblivion again, and it was funny because I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the look of that movie. Andrew Riseborough is great. Tom Cruise is great in that movie. The world looks amazing. The score, with an assist by M83, is excellent. Great production design, filming on location. You don't see that anymore. But it was a boring movie. My sister still gave it an 8 out of 10. So the last movie, most recent movie that I saw the other night, which was a rewatch, and it's the 3rd time I've watched it, is Margin Call. It is like The Big Short, but good. The Big Short just never stops explaining to you everything and breaks the 4th wall and does all these neat party tricks that movies cannot do, whatever that means. It's like, here's Margot Robbie in a bubble bath. Here's Anthony Bourdain, cutting sushi or something, explaining something that they themselves don't understand. But isn't it so cool how we don't give a shit? Look how wacky this movie is being, and also the wig work is terrible. I do not like The Big Short, if you didn't gather. It's weird. I saw it in theaters, and I usually have a bigger appreciation for movies in theaters, especially ones during Oscar time. But yeah, it was interesting how it's structured in its screenplay, but it doesn't tell a story visually. Does Margin Call? A bit. It's shot on film and in offices the whole time, so the lighting is fluorescent, and to get images out of that, it basically feeds on close-ups and terminals and listening to the dialogue. There's one scene that just kind of breaks things up that's kind of odd, where basically Zachary Quinto, who played Spock, and Penn Badgley, who played Joe Goldberg on the series U, are asked to go look for Stanley Tucci. Self-explained. There's one shot of just them at a strip club, I guess, or a bar, and there's a lady walking in the foreground. You just see her legs. She is walking on a stage, and then in the midground there is the bar that they are resting at, and a row of cans, and it's just perfectly lined up of, like, we need a scene of visual difference, of people talking about something just to change the pace or the tone or lighten things up a little bit. So that's an example of something unnecessary being added to the plot. Quentin Tarantino does this all the time to entertain the audience or diversify things in terms of like, okay, we're in a lot of office talking, we need to break up the monotony. So I would say despite its limited setting, it is very good. Of course, this movie hangs itself on the Oscar-nominated screenplay, and it explains itself pretty well in a way that you don't really know what is going on, although the central premise of it is one guy discovers that his billion, nay, trillion-dollar investment bank has been over-leveraged and is ready to file for bankruptcy the night before it opens. And the movie basically takes a trip up the corporate ladder from the guy's boss to his boss's boss to his boss's boss's boss, all the way up to the CEO of the company as they hit the panic button and try and figure out what to do with the company. And it's inspired by what happened the night before the financial crash of 2008, of what might have happened when investment banks basically decided to sell the world out. Fascinating movie, great dialogue. You've probably seen it because it's one of those streaming movies that makes the rounds and people are like, hey, this is a good movie. There's so many TikToks of it on, and I watch them every time. Here's what I'm playing now. Nothing. I haven't needed to. I've been spending my time with my nephews. Time well spent. And even though gaming is so accessible to me, I downloaded before I left not just Cyberpunk on my laptop, which I have in front of me, but games on Netflix, Oxenfree, which is a walking simulator, and the other one being Braid, which was a game that was on Xbox Live Arcade back in the day, and I want to play it, but I don't really have the mood to. I'm fascinated by it. I even bought my Xbox controller with me on this trip, but I don't want to break apart and invest into it. Maybe I will when I can go home and relax, however long that can be. But it's kind of funny because it's not important to me. I still consume endless amounts of news. I've been following the PlayStation State of Play where they introduced an Astro Bot game. They also introduced the Silent Hill 2 remake. And I was so surprised that the Silent Hill 2 remake, which is a remake of one of the best regarded games of all time, a horror game about a guy who looks for his wife in Silent Hill, as a ghost town and encounters monsters. I was surprised based on the developer's previous work that it was not going to be a, security cam walkthrough like the old one was with high rendering. No, it's a third-person shooter, but I watched about 10 minutes of gameplay and was like, okay, this is boring. I'm not into this. Even though it's the Resident Evil over-the-shoulder aesthetic, and other Silent Hills have done that. Silent Hill always felt to me like it could have been Resident Evil, but Capcom is too savvy of doing what the Japanese love, but Americans also love, whereas Konami, which I think might be Korean, I'll have to look it up, but they are too maybe exotic and out there that they can't really reconcile. This is what people like. Nonetheless, Bloober Team is the studio behind it, making it, and they are from, where are they from? I mean, they're owned partially by Tencent, which is a Chinese developer, and they're a public company, but they're from Poland, interestingly. So it will be interesting to see how they handle making a game like this because I don't think that it's very, that they're particularly suited to this. Like, they're not engaging. It's like a walking simulator without the story. It feels like a tech demo, but Konami is, they're a Japanese company, I guess, so they're not Korean. So in that way, they're like Capcom. But what's fascinating to me is that both being Japanese video game companies, one just gets it more than the other. Anyways, I watched about 10 minutes of this from the PlayStation showcase, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, third-person shooter, I like that. Or third-person action game, third-person perspective. And a remake of a game I haven't played. Tried to play the HD version, which was so terribly done. If you get the HD version on consoles, the frame rate will drop to like 12 frames a second. And this is a PlayStation 1 game or PlayStation 2 game running on Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3. So it should smoke it, but it gets smoked because the original people who were supposed to remaster it did a terrible job. So I should be looking forward to this, but it's one of those games that should be essentially like Slender Man, where it needs a crappy aesthetic to work, maybe. Because I watched, 10 minutes of high-definition footage, and I'm like, I'm bored by this. I don't want it. So I hope they make a good game, but initial word of mouth is not great on this, even though it looks relatively nice. It's just one of those weird things that I won't say can't be adapted, but can't be adapted 100% aesthetically well. So that's what I'm not playing. I'm looking forward to the E3 news, which should be just right around now. Summer Games Fest is in a few days. Maybe we'll see a demo for Call of Duty Black Ops 6, which is coming to last gen again, so I don't have to get another PlayStation for the next generation. I can still wait a bit longer. So, yeah. Technical issues today, I transferred an iPhone, which is why I'm using an iPhone for this. I transferred my sister's old iPhone, which I'd been meaning to do for a long time, from one phone to the other. As usual with me, it went difficult. I started it, and of course the way that iPhone manages people transferring is it pictures that, of course, the transfer would be there the whole time, and why would they not be? The answer is they don't know how. So immediately it turns on Face ID, and I don't have the face of the owner. So wrong. Okay, now it's locked out. And I put in the password and did what I thought was it, but turned out I did it correctly, but the wrong way, because I was looking to transfer, and all it simply did was turn on and set up and plug in through, iCloud. But did it back up? No, because it didn't know that it was supposed to be setting up a new phone. And then when I hit back up, it gave me a question of like, well, would you like to back up this phone that you just set up? And it's like, no, I have nothing on it. But the phone doesn't know that. So, of course, I had to go and look it up, as I did yesterday for a stroller on how to fold the stroller in. I looked up the instruction booklet, didn't help. Watched 2 different YouTube videos, didn't help. Ay. Why are people not good at giving instructions? There is a line in Margin Call where Jeremy Irons, who is the CEO of the investment banking company, says to the rocket scientist, speak to me as if you would a dog or a small child. It is not brains that got me here. You have to assume anytime you're explaining something that you will be explaining to someone of the lowest intelligence threshold possible. And if you cannot explain it in those terms, then you should not be explaining it, because you don't know. It can be different if someone else is there or not there and you have to step in. But if you're making an instructional video or training somebody, if you cannot explain it to a 5-year-old, you do not understand the concept yourself. And I'm constantly explaining things to my 5-year-old nephew of like, is this guy good? Yes. Is this guy bad? No. Is this droid, is this a bad guy? Well, it's neutral. Well, what does neutral mean? It means they're in between good and bad. That's what it means, you know? Explaining difficult concepts very simply. That's what it's about. And we're missing that when it comes to instructions for strollers, at least. So I had trouble with that, didn't do it. My sister was able to fold it, yay. But the iPhone transfer, iPhone's technical stuff is my domain, but I always find a way to mess it up because I'm an idiot when it comes to technology like anyone else. However, I just have the tenacity, the confidence, the hard work to pull it off. So I set it up, and then I realized halfway through, even after I plug in the SIM, that this isn't going to work. This isn't working the correct way, so I have to pull it out and start completely again. And, you know, raising kids is exhausting, so she has to go to bed and stuff, but the baby cries, so she's still up. And then I'm like, okay, well, we're restarting. Take out the SIM card, reset the entire iPhone. Then I start it up and do the whole Face ID thing, and then continue. And then first set of problems is email. This email hasn't been entered in a while. Please re-enter the email. This email password hasn't been entered in so long. There's an old phone number attached to it. So how can you recover the password that has not been accepted? The sign-in was blocked because too many failures. That was the whole Face ID thing, because I was setting it up and it Face ID'd me 3 times and not my sister. Because it did that, possibly, or other reasons, these major companies decide to block sign-ins of like, well, you entered the password correctly, but we don't like that it took you so many times. We think that your bank account, which has maybe $20,000 in it total, is the target of some massive hack, which granted is possible, but most people don't get hacked. And when they do, there's nothing of value that gets hacked. Yes, there's information. Yes, that gets sold. But, you know, people whose identity gets stolen, how often is that not quickly reversible? Like, I find that tech companies use security as a guise to push through things that are unpopular. And that's just how these tech mechanisms work. So with great difficulty, I reset the password of this very old email address. Thankfully, my sister would have killed me if I had to create a new email address, which, by the way, a lot of people just seem to toss off as no big deal these days, of like, oh, you just created another email address. It's like, oh, so why don't I just move to another virtual house then? Because that's the equivalent of what you are asking me to do. You're asking me to move from address to address, as if it's no big deal. And let me tell you, I have a lot of signups there. Why should I have a second email address for your benefit? That's what Amazon told my dad, and now he has 2 separate emails because of Amazon. And, you know, he logs in somewhere. Oh, let me do that login for you. Logs him into the wrong account. That's what we're dealing with, but we're also dealing with coders who create frameworks that assume that every single person is an individual man who is single, living alone in an apartment, has infinite time to do things, is comfortable giving up all of their information, and is always the one fixing their own problems. These people do not know how to live. It's very frustrating to me. So, where does that leave me? Well, there's a class action lawsuit going around in Canada. Started in British Columbia, but if you type in Canadian class action iPhone lawsuit, you can pick up the serial number of an iPhone 6 or an iPhone 7, put it in to this thing along with your major information, and if you had an iPhone 6 or 7 that downloaded an update before a certain time in like 2017, then you are eligible for a check of up to $150 because Apple, in their attempt to better the world, decided that their new iPhones were more important than customers with older iPhones, so they introduced a software update that, in order to use energy, took energy from older phones and throttled their batteries, making them less than good, less than they needed to be, in order to boost their new batteries and make their new iPhones quicker. Well, the governments and watchdogs were not happy with that because it is sabotaging their own product. And, of course, they admit no wrongdoing and are like, well, we appreciate consumer choice, and this is something that we take very seriously, being misinterpretation, apologies, non-apologies, settlements. And so my sister had a lot of iPhones lying around, so I was able to fill out this class action and send some money somebody's way. So if you have an iPhone 6 or 7, you can look up this class action, put in your iPhone serial number. The work and checking if it's correct or not will be done for you. Put in your information. The deadline is in September. You get a check mailed to you or direct money transfer. And that's how we get back at the world. I've never used an iPhone. I find them to be too big, although I'm looking at an iPhone 5C right now and thought it was so nice when phones were that small. And that's how they should be. People want us attached to our phones with big giant screens. I don't like that for phones. Let me sit down, let me relax, let me go somewhere. I don't really get immersed watching on my phone, and I can't watch on my phone for long. So that's the technical issue that I'm having. And I did end up transferring the phone. We went to Best Buy to get a case, and the main guy that I spoke to could not tell the difference between an iPhone 12 and 13, even though he had an iPhone 13 at the desk, and that looks like a brick, and the iPhone 12 looks like a pill. They're the same shape, same dimensions, but one is thicker and it's a flat top. The other has rounded sides. This guy didn't know, so that really annoyed me that he didn't know his stuff. And he had a thick accent. That really annoyed me. But as we've established, that has nothing to do, absolutely nothing to do with customer service, because customer service, as we all know, is something that is taught. And in fact, all three of them, the workers who were there, all three of them had different accents. I have no idea where they were all from. But they don't have good customer service, famously, in my opinion, at Best Buy. You never know who you're getting. And this guy didn't know what case we were getting. And they tend to do this thing where, I'm sorry, I don't have all the answers, but the people who are supposed to be helping you look at you, and I'm sorry, I'm starting to sound like RFK Jr. here, but they look at you like you're an alien. Like, what? Why don't you know this thing about your own product? It's like, I don't know it because I know I can come to you to help me. And the third guy was very helpful, fortunately. But I just didn't find the way they explained things to be that speak to me like a 5-year-old thing. When you go, and it happens with my father all the time, they go to a tech place, and they're like, oh, you just need to unlock your bobsled and download Veracom, and next thing you know, you got it, just use your current smartphone. My dad doesn't have a current smartphone. This is all gibberish to him. Do they not understand that a senior citizen does not know what the heck they are talking about? Because anytime I go into a place, it's the opposite for me. I'll ask a question, and I will know more than them, and I'll keep an open mind, but it's like, yeah, well, this is useless because the workers aren't doing their research on a product, and they don't really know what to sell, and yeah, it's a minimum wage job, and nobody really cares, but that's super frustrating to me. Just, if you're going to work at a tech store, not only know your stuff, but know how to explain it, and treat customers fairly, and explain concepts completely. Explaining a charging block, or explaining to my mother that I cannot call her because my phone is broken. Yes, my Google Pixel 4a, which took wonderful photos, is caught in a feedback loop where if I plug it in, it will charge and then reset, and then reset, and reset, and reset. This is a problem that's been going back multiple iPhone models and just hasn't been fixed because Google doesn't work out kinks because they know they don't need to. They're too big to fail. Well, now I have a useless phone, and I can't record on my regular phone, and I have to send emails to myself from my sister's phone. That is ridiculous. It is because Google realizes they don't have to follow the rules of other phone manufacturers. We can always fall back on search. There are other avenues. And that's the flaw. When a corporation goes beyond becoming a single-use product or a single-service product, it becomes very difficult to maintain quality because they start to lean on each other without producing the appropriate synergies. And, yeah, that's what annoys me. So my stay here is coming to an end. And I wouldn't say not ready to go back to my boring life. It is interesting being here, although never close to feeling like home. It's just interesting. I appreciate being welcome. This Uncle Week was kind of eye-opening in a way for me. I've pointed out to other people that my generation has been raised essentially on movies where a character like myself, who's an adult man-child, is thrust upon fatherhood suddenly. And this is seen as like a disaster with a pat ending that's always like, oh, it's okay because having a child is the most rewarding experience there is. And it's all tell and no show. They don't show you that. It's basically the premise of these movies. This kid is a total jackass who's super annoying, but they're kind of cute, I guess. Welcome to fatherhood. It's miserable. And movies like Life as We Know It and Knocked Up, Raising Helen, Baby Boom is another one, although I haven't seen that one. Kramer versus Kramer is sort of another one, although that has a more, like, he really grows to be rewarded by his, that's the genre done right there. He's really rewarded by his child in that movie, with love. But another one is The Babadook. Another one is the movie Come On, Come On, where it's just like, these kids are so annoying. I hate them. Why do I have to care for them? That's the movies that basically changed our generation into wanting kids because all of their friends got divorced. And then they saw these movies where parenting came across as miserable, backbreaking stuff that would turn you poor. So people said, I don't want that. I don't need that. And now there's this big kind of like, we don't need kids to be fulfilled and have a family. Kind of, yes, you do, because children are the future. They are your legacy. So if you're in your 50s, granted, there are people who parenthood definitely is not for. And excellent to them for admitting it. Sam Rockwell comes first to mind. Seth Rogen is a bit different, where He's in a financially extremely viable position. He's with a girl that he loves. Maybe he just, he said, I never once regret not having children, so maybe it's the same there, but he's like, yeah, I'd rather smoke weed and play video games. And then he does his signature laugh. That's the worst impression of Seth Rogen I've ever heard in my life that I just did there. Because my voice isn't stoned. It is not glazed. It is dry. So yeah, sorry about that. Good for them for not having kids, I suppose. People have less children now. But tell me, disagree with me that those movies didn't have an effect on it, because I believe that they did. Juno's another one, where it's just like, we have a kid, how do we deal with this problem? And movies need to basically look at children, and it will happen because I feel the same way, and people have the sensibilities I do. People need to look at movies where people raise kids now as, this kid is an investment in the future and my future. And how does parenthood look that way on film going forward? Because it is rewarding, and being rewarding isn't when the kid is being cute. It is when you taught somebody something. It is when you make an impression and change the life and make the world a better place. It's when they make you happy, not depressed. It is when you help the human race survive. I think there is, if I can put on my tinfoil hat here, a conspiracy to make westernized people fear having kids so that immigration can boom. And if immigration booms, then powerful outside forces can rule with their cultural knowledge, understanding, and agendas without interference. That's my tinfoil hat conspiracy. Somebody should make a movie about that. Anyways, I'm out of water, and I need to go to bed. I may make an attempt to see Furiosa Mad Max Saga tomorrow, but my partner in crime, who has done a podcast in the past with me, works during the weekdays and hasn't responded to going to see. And my sister is busy with the kids, so I'm not sure I can finagle the husband to watch over a kid while he's simultaneously working remote work. So, we will see. And I will update you next week on what could truly be the season finale of the FilmGamer podcast. Check it out. Thanks for listening. Thanks for enduring my voice and iPhone memos, which a lot of people do and record through podcasts, by the way. But I'm out of practice. So, take care. Bye-bye then. And I'll see you next week.